you write a lot about like death and
Mhm.
and facing death in your life, and how that's a transformative thing for people. And that's something that has guided my life. Like I've been in a few car accidents. I've had some psychedelic um, experiences involving death, and um, a lot of my writing has to do with death as well. Just because of how much it's changed my paradigm in life and has been the vehicle for my change. So, so I thought that was really interesting. Like, I, I noticed that there's something that links people who I wrote about this. Like everyone who is comfortable talking about death has seen it in one way or another, and it's noticeable in their life.
Mhm.
Some people don't like talking about it, and you can tell the people who are really comfortable with it, that it's really changed them.
Yeah, I think one of the things so for people who haven't read my writing, I don't talk about death from the perspective of like grief and bereavement. I talk about it from Memento Mori, right? So I think the reason people like you and me and a lot of entrepreneurs gravitate toward things like that is a lot of us gravitate towards stoicism, right? Because it's just a very practical philosophical approach, right? I came across Memento Mori, which just means remember death or remember you will die. I came across it through Ryan Holiday's books, right? So I really like the idea of using mortality as a motivator to live fully, right? Because most people either take their time for granted or they pursue just the wrong shit. I hope I can cuss on here.
Yeah.
Um, and they chase the wrong things, and then they end up being 60, 70, 80, and they look back on their life full of regrets, right? So when I first came across this concept, I was like, shit, man, like I am totally taking so much of my life for granted, right? Like I'm not spending time with the people I love, I'm not being present when I'm with them, but also I'm procrastinating because I'm acting like I'm going to live forever, or like, oh, I'll do that later. I'll start my website next year. I'll do this, later, later, later. Well, eventually later is no longer an option. Right. So I thought I had a pretty good handle over Memento Mori, but it was very theoretical still. And then this last year, I actually almost died. So then it became way more than theoretical. Right. So long story short, and I've written about this too, but through jujitsu, I got a really bad bruise, right? So I do a lot of butterfly guard. And at the time, I was doing a lot of shin on shin stuff. And when you do that, shin bruises are super common. I had one that I thought was like a hairline fracture. It hurt so bad. It was in a spot that I had gotten bruises tons of other times, so I didn't think anything about it. So, jujitsu guy, I'm like, fuck it. If it's still bad in a week, maybe then I'll go to the doctor,
Right.
right? I'll
Right.
try to walk it off. And it got way worse. And my skin, legs started turning purple and red and just
Oh my
weird
God.
colors. Yeah. So I went to the doctor and they're like, oh, you have um, a hematoma and it may have become infected and become an abscess. Take these meds. If it gets worse, come back. It got way worse. So by the time I got back to the hospital, they immediately prepped me for surgery because they're like, look, we're waiting on test results, but we don't know if the infection has gotten into your bloodstream or your bones. If it
Whoa.
has, you can die or at the very least lose a limb. I was like, fuck. And, this is during COVID shit too, right? So I was in the ER waiting for a hospital bed for like 12 or 18 hours. Like it was insane because all the beds were full. So they finally, get me in and, I have to have surgery and things to remove all of the infected tissue and things. And thankfully, I was good. I just have like gnarly scar now. But when I was in the hospital the night before surgery, it was just me, right? Because again, COVID, visitation restrictions, like you can't have anybody in the room with you, which is super fucked up. So I'm just sitting there alone in this hospital bed with just like the beeping of the machine and like the occasional nurse coming in to draw blood to keep me company. So I remember laying in bed, not knowing if I was going to die or not. And I thought to myself, what if this was the last week alive for me? right? And you hear about these thought exercises like, oh, if you only had a week to live or a month to live, like what would you do? That's bullshit. Because if you have time to plan it out, you can go out with a bang, you can party, you can skydive, do all this other shit. That isn't a helpful thought experiment. For me, it was like, am I satisfied with how I've already lived? So if I can't do anything more, let me look back. Am I satisfied with how I spent my time? And thankfully that week I spent time writing online, coaching people, spending time with my loved ones, doing jujitsu. I was satisfied with what could have been my last week alive. So ever since then, I'm like, look, any week could be my last. So I don't fuck with shit that isn't fulfilling. I have turned down, therapy jobs for close to $100,000 because I'm like, look, I no longer want to do that. I don't want to work 40, 50 hours doing, dealing with bureaucracy and red tape and insurance bullshit. I want to coach. I want to write. I want to teach. If it isn't those things, that doesn't give me freedom and that isn't truly and deeply fulfilling for me, I just don't fuck with it anymore.
Yeah. That's one of the craziest jujitsu injury stories I've ever heard.
Yeah, dude, like for real, they're like, I don't fuck with shit on shit anymore. Like, I know it affects my game, but I'm like, look, man, like I can't.
I understand that, dude. I can't imagine, but I know that's a familiar bruise, that shin bruise.
Yeah.
That's a brutal feeling, man. So that's amazing. That's amazing. So there's a lot to unpack there because most people, this is what I try to get across in my writing all the time. It's like, how do you give people that urgency? You can't really think yourself into it. You could try. It's fun. It's kind of fun to be like, okay, if someone walked in and put a gun to your head right now, and said, what did you, it's like the Fight Club, like, what did you wish you would have done? That's kind of a fun thought experiment, but like, until you actually are facing death, and you have to have that feeling of like, holy shit, like the door is right there and I'm getting pushed towards the door and I don't want to go through it. That sense of existential urgency is what people, I think, what ties people who have had these life-changing experiences together. What do you think, like, is the most effective method that you've found for helping people have this like realization in their life, or have this mortal confrontation willingly?
So some of the people I work with have already had their own experiences, or they're at least familiar with, Memento Mori and things. So that's usually helpful. Others, they haven't, but they have felt that pull of like, I know I could do more with my life. Some of the people I've worked with have chased money to the exclusion of meaning, right? So like, money isn't bad. There's nothing wrong with money. But when you pursue money that is unfulfilling and makes you miserable, that becomes an issue, right? So a lot of the people that end up, either hiring me for coaching or, we talk or whatever, it's usually around like, hey man, I'm trying to figure out what is worth my time to do. Like, what do I dedicate my life to at this point? So either they're trying to break out of the 9 to 5 and trying to build, a business that is purpose driven for them, or they've already built other businesses that didn't align with the person they wanted to be. So now they're like, look, I don't have clarity on what the fuck I'm even aiming at. I need help developing that clarity. So that's usually what I do. Occasionally I'll get somebody who hasn't come across Memento more than like I explain it in different terms. One of the other stories that I share, and is part of the reason why I got into writing and coaching and things, is, again, back to Memento Mori. I had a couple friends. So one of them, he was an attorney for years. He did the traditional job route, but he was really passionate about writing. He really wanted to be an author. So over the last couple of years, he had quit practicing law and started writing a book. He sunk all his life savings into it, and he and his partner were super excited for this book. And then one day he went to the doctor and he got diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 2 weeks later, he was dead. Right. So, as a writer, that's terrifying, right? Like to die with a half completed manuscript. And then shortly, like around that same time, I had another friend, same deal. He went the traditional route, was, did some other, jobs and shit he didn't really care about. Finally went back to get a creative writing degree, also to write a book, a memoir, something like that. Halfway through the program, fucking died, right? Like freak accident type health issue. And then around the same time, I had a third friend. She retired early to enjoy her health because she didn't, she liked her job, but it didn't really fulfill her. So she's like, I'm going to retire so I can enjoy my health while I still have it. Within the year, she was diagnosed with like metastatic breast cancer, and it's like untreatable. So really all they can do is like palliative care. And I got so pissed off because that's 3 friends back to back to back who pushed off pursuing a fulfilling life because they were afraid, right? Afraid of failure, afraid of ridicule, afraid of uncertainty, all this other shit. So that was what really pushed me over the edge to put myself out there, to write online and to share my experience and expertise in psychology to try to help as many people as I can, because, I just too many people die regretting not having done more with their lives. There's even like a fucking Cornell study that said like 76% of people die with the same regret. And it was essentially that they didn't live up to like their ideal self, or, basically they lived in mediocrity. And then on their deathbed, they're like, fuck, I really wish I would have taken more chances. Right. So like, that's where I come in, is like, I'm trying to help you avoid that on down the line by now, regardless of how old you are, identifying what the fuck makes you tick on a fundamental level and how can you build your life around that so that you can, reach your potential, pursue self-actualization, whatever the fuck you want to call it, just get more out of life than what most people are willing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's amazing.